Tonight, a Missouri man has been executed by the state, but a deeply unsettling question remains. Was Marcellus Williams innocent? He was accused of killing Felicia Gale in 1998, but a re-examination of evidence raised questions about whether he actually did it. After years of investigations and hearings, Missouri Governor Mike Parsons stepped in this year and ordered the execution to move forward. Now, that was despite prosecutors, Williams's family, and even the family of Gale pleading to spare Williams's life. Now, that did not happen. And tonight, a last-ditch appeal to the Supreme Court was rejected with a 6-3 vote falling along ideological lines. A devout, practicing Muslim, Williams' last words were, "All praise be to Allah in every situation." The man's last meal, chicken wings and tater tots. And at 7:01 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, Marcellus Williams was given the lethal injection of the sedative pentobarbital, and 9 minutes later, he was pronounced dead.
At one point, he appeared to wiggle his feet, which were underneath a white sheet that's pulled up to his neck, and moved his head slightly. Then I could see his chest heaved about a half dozen times. I didn't see any movement after that.
The death penalty, ladies and gentlemen. Neither family spoke after the execution, but many people in the public did. Nearly 100 people protesting outside of the correctional facility even today. But the governor, through a spokesperson, well, they defended the execution.
No juror nor judge has ever found Williams' innocence claim to be credible. 2 decades of judicial proceedings and more than 15 judicial hearings upheld his guilty conviction. Thus, the order of execution has been carried out.
With me now, St. Louis prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell, who is also running for Congress. Wesley Bell, you and I have spoken in the past when there was a chance that they would stay the execution, a fancy way of saying to continue for time to investigate the possibility that he was in fact innocent. What is your reaction tonight knowing that that did not happen and he is now dead?
Justice, the interests of justice were not served. And as a prosecutor, as you know, as a former prosecutor, our job is not to get convictions, it's not to collect stats, it's to bring justice. And for us, for the folks that in my office, Lathrop GPM, Matthew Jacoby, Elena McMullen, Teresa Hurla, my office, the Conviction Incident Review Unit led by Jessica Hathaway. We're talking about folks who invested blood, sweat, and now tears to spare his life because it was the right thing to do. If there's the shadow of a doubt with respect to innocence or the integrity of a conviction, at the very least, that individual should not be executed. And it is, to say disappointing would be an understatement. There were several opportunities on the timeline, if you will. Obviously, this case predated me originally. And so there's, 20 plus years ago, but throughout the appellate process and now once we have had an opportunity, there have been opportunities for decisions to be made that should have resulted in Mr. Williams' life being spared, and the system failed. It failed all of us. You
have to wonder why there was such a vested interest in the speed of this. After this was a murder from decades ago at this point in time, now that this was underway, why do you think there was the haste to do so? Given your office said no, the victims' families said no, he was not asking to be released. He wanted time to investigate further and was even willing to plead guilty to lesser charges, which I might add, there were people who said, well, hold on, that must mean that he's probably guilty. What's your response to that?
What he was willing to agree to was called an Alford plea, as you know, which he is not pleading guilty to the charges. He's acknowledging that there's enough evidence to convict him. But that was really for us to be able to buy time to be able to investigate his claims of innocence, because the execution date was set. If the execution date was stayed or just pushed back a few months to give us more time to investigate this matter, we may have been able to determine whether or not he was in fact innocent or not. But as you know, it's not just about innocence. It's also about the integrity of the conviction.
Right.
And there are serious, legitimate concerns about this conviction. And at the very least, he shouldn't be executed. That's what we're asking. This was not a dichotomy between execution or release. This was execution or life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then his team and they would have time to vet his claims of innocence. But now we're looking at a family who had to relive this again. Felicia Gale's family had to relive this all over again. And as the prosecutor, I can't look them in the eye and say the right person was punished because we don't know.
That's the scariest aspect of this, and also very difficult to maintain faith in a system that prosecutors, you and I know how impactful and how much we can control certain aspects of it. And to know that you were fighting to understand the integrity of a conviction, and that's done.
Right. We have to, our job, we have to recommend folks go to jail sometime. That's part of our job. But it's also part of our job to make certain there's safeguards to ensure that we get it right, even if that means 20 years later. And so even though this case predated me, it was, our offices still had an obligation to do everything that we could to make certain that justice was served. And we fought, it's tough. It's tough.
It is very emotional to think about what happened at 7 p.m. tonight. Wesley Bell, thank you so much.